violence, incarceration, surveillance, police violence, and the systemic cycles. We know that poverty has a disproportionate impact on Indigenous people, racialized communities, 2S LGBTQ people, women, single parents, people with disabilities. For many, the COVID-19 pandemic has ripped open and exposed the deep inequities that have long existed in our country. If you have a low income, you've had challenges added to your plate, including accessing food, childcare, and paying for new communication to get in touch with loved ones or access basic services. More support from our provincial government is needed to help those made extra by COVID-19. Not just words, but action to support communities. Current challenges with EIA and CERB have demonstrated clearly how Manitoba's income assistance programs are not working well to assist people living in poverty. Many might be at risk of being worse off than we now. There are alternatives for what our province can do right now and in the longer term to make sure that there's enough for all forever. Today, you are part of ensuring that our province supports everyone through COVID-19 by joining this webinar. So far, our collective calls throughout the past 2 months for greater support are forcing the provincial government to take more action. Last week, Premier Pallister announced a $200 check for low-income people with disabilities. While that's not nearly enough, and we need support for everybody living in poverty, by joining this webinar, you will be part of the growing numbers of Manitobans aware of these issues, ready to call on our provincial government to do more. There is power in numbers collectively coming together to amplify this call. Later on in the webinar, at the end, we'll share with you ways to take action and also be posting in the comments. We need folks to sign petitions, contact your MLA and the minister. If you're a senior, to share with us what you're going to do with that $200 check to help end poverty. Sign up to learn more. Please stay tuned for those links. I'm really excited to this wonderful, passionate, and documented. We'll share a variety of perspectives from their experience of poverty and COVID-19, working on the front lines to support communities, and what policy changes we need to see right now. After we hear from today's speakers, we will have some questions and answer. We will be monitoring the live stream, so feel free to put your questions in the chat or on Facebook or YouTube, and we will try to get to them at the end. My heart feels very heavy these days, and I'm sure yours does too. I'm really happy that Geraldine Shingoose, or as we call her, Grandma Shingoose, has offered to share a blessing and some words with us today. Earlier this morning, I offered Grandma some tobacco in a safe and socially distant way for joining us today. I'm so happy, Grandma, that you agreed to start our webinar off today in a good way. We definitely need it. So I'll pass it next to Grandma Shingoose, who's going to start our webinar.
Good morning, Geraldine Shingoose. My spirit name's and Northern Lights woman. I come on, and my warrior spirit is. Thank you to the organizers for inviting me to this webinar to do the opening. It's always an honor to be in that position. We need to speak today and what it means to everyone. So I have this tobacco that was offered to me, and I say to me, which for that. Before I began as much, I used sage, and then I'm going to be using some Thunderbird medicine, and I'll be lighting it. And while I'm lighting this, much one of you to our Black brothers and sisters who are in the United States, Black Lives Matter. But I also want you to think about it's a 1-year anniversary for the murdered and missing Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit. So we want to acknowledge and honor them, their stories and their testimonies today, because they've been ignored. The federal government hasn't put any of their calls to justice into action, and it's been 1 year. So while I would like to much think of the families also think of George Floyd's families, and I offer my sympathies to his family. And what I'm witnessing in the United States is that everybody's becoming part of their family. So I want to say poverty is our Indigenous nation. We all, each one of us, have carry our sacred laws. Everybody goes against that sacred. It's being witnessed today in the Western world, where we have privileged and non-privileged, and I guess it's a question that we need to ask ourselves: is are we privileged? Are we not privileged? Our ancestors, when the European settlers arrived, they shared openly in a good way. But it wasn't to make it mine or ours. It was to share in a loving, compassion way. That's the way our Indigenous laws, that caring and compassion. We have no value for money, but today that money, we need food. We need to buy our basic. It's those basic needs are sacred. That everybody should be treated equally. We should all have basic human rights to meet basic needs for everyone across the land, across Turtle Island. It's unfortunate and sad to see our people, all people that are suffering in poverty. It breaks my heart as a grandmother to see that. So with that, I'll go into the prayer. Bonjour, to Hishikishwe. I come to you in prayer today. Today is a unique, special, and it should be like that every day. Pray for we brothers and sisters in the south. They've woken the black wolf because that's the direction that the black wolf sits, the black eagle, the black bear, and the black turtle. I pray to that direction, and I ask that they walk with our and protect our brothers and sisters who are fighting for basic human rights, to be equal, to be treated equal. I pray for that spirit of racism and discrimination, which brings harm to everyone that experiences it. I pray for George Floyd, who's making his journey to the spirit world right now. I ask that the grandfathers and the grandmothers welcome. Humble in my prayer, Creator, because it hurts. Seeing 9 minutes of a man's life being taken. But it also makes me proud, Creator, to see all the people standing up. There's a revolution, Creator. It's going to happen, and I ask that you walk with each one of us during this critical time. I pray for the families of the murdered and missing Indigenous women. Today's 1 year anniversary of the release of the report from the inquiry. I pray that you hear their prayers. I know that you heard their prayers. I know that you heard their stories. I know you heard their testimonies. And I ask that you continue to walk with each one of them in that hope. No government can take away what they're feeling, but that government needs to acknowledge their stories. We need to honor them and acknowledge them. With that, organizers of this webinar, and I pray that we all come to an agreement and come up with a plan for action for the injustice of poverty. It's not. I pray for the people that are living in poverty right now, their families, the children. With that, I want to say chimigwech to these medicines that I have here in front of me and to these gifts and say, I will say, and chimigwech. There goes Michael. Okay.
Hi there. I believe I'm hosting now. We're just overcoming some tech. I really wanted to thank Grandma Shingrus for her incredibly wise words there. And yes, collectively we mourn the lives of all of those lost to racism and to violence, and George Floyd and all of the Black communities that are struggling right now. We stand in solidarity with you. So we'll see you this Friday at 6 at the Manitoba Legislature for the rally led by Black and people of color to raise awareness and to say we must stop this racism and this systemic racism. I'm Molly McCracken. I'm one of the members of the steering committee of Make Poverty History. This is our first time doing this, so we're just learning a bit about the technology. We're trying to speak slowly and clearly, so hopefully you can hear us out there, and thanks to everybody who's joining us. I'm now going to introduce one of our speakers. We're so grateful for all of our speakers today, and Debbie Stilito is an incredible advocate in our community and a member of Make Poverty History Manitoba. Is there feedback? Debbie is working at the Low Income Intermediary Project, caring for those on EIA, while also helping loved ones at home. And she is currently on employment and income assistance disability, and she's a very important member of our coalition. So over to you, Debbie.
fierce community activist, advocate, and leader, and is the executive director of the West Central Women's Resource Centre, and also serves on our Make Poverty History Steering Committee, in addition to many other ways that Laurie contributes. Laurie's work at the Centre for Women, Trans, and Non-Binary People is remarkable, in addition to her ability of fighting for systemic change and the policies we need to get there. So welcome, Laurie, and I'll pass it off to you.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks everyone for joining. And I want to thank Grandma Shingoose for her words. I know that my heart is certainly heavy these days, and having guidance from incredible elders like Grandma is so critical to all of us, I think, in these times. I also want to acknowledge that I live and work every day on Treaty 1 territory, and understanding the privilege that affords me is something that is ever present in my mind. It has not far from my mind today, the anniversary of the release of the Calls for Justice. This time last year, I was sitting in a room with 50 really powerful housing advocates, women from across the country, many of whom were First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, and we shared together the impact of the Calls for Justice and how we wanted to stand together in our fight for those justices to be seen for the Indigenous communities across the country. So I've been very reflective of that today. Also very reflective, of course, of the challenges that we're facing with Black Lives Matter. And it's easy to look south of the border and think that we don't face these troubles here in Canada. The reality is that racism is alive and well here in our city, not just against Indigenous folks, although we see that far too often, but also against Black and other people of color. And it's time that we all unite around these causes and really stand up for the justice and the human rights that are due to racialized communities. So I was asked to talk a little bit about our work around COVID-19 and how we've pivoted as a center to respond to the needs, what we've seen, and a little bit about the folks that are hardest hit by this. And so I'll just take a minute to say that for us, transitioning our services was definitely a unique challenge, but one we were committed to overcoming. Within about 48 hours, we were able to pivot the way we deliver service to community. And we knew that because so many people in our neighborhood and across the city really depend on us to get their basic needs met, that we just simply could not be another door that closed during what is a difficult time for everybody. And so we looked quickly at how we could deliver food service in a different way. We're now doing meals out the door rather than a congregate meal that we used to hold daily. We've switched to providing food hamper service. We're now doing things like street outreach, and being creative with how we reach out to folks who are in emergency situations, whether they're housing or gender-based violence, whatever sorts of emergencies they find themselves in, trying to continue to meet those needs. One of the things people depend on us, I think, the most for often is just a way to connect and build community, and that's been something that's been really difficult